My children didn't wait for me to die to try and claim their inheritance. They tried to sell it right out from under me, while I was still living and breathing in it. They saw my home not as the place that nurtured them, but as a pile of bricks and mortar they could liquidate for their own selfish needs. They mistook my kindness for weakness, my sacrifice for stupidity. They were wrong. They were so wrong. Hello and welcome. If you believe that the deepest betrayals come from those closest to us, and that justice, when it's finally served, should be cold, calculated, and absolute, then you're in the right place. Settle in, and listen closely. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this is a story about a mother who refused to be erased, a woman who decided to become the monster her children believed she couldn't be. This is the story of how I lost everything, and then took it all back, and then some.
Part 1. The Foundation of Lies. The house wasn't grand. Not by today's standards, anyway. It was a simple 2-story colonial with white siding that needed a fresh coat of paint and black shutters that had faded to a charcoal gray. But its foundation wasn't just concrete. It was built on sacrifice. My sacrifice. My name is Claire, I'm 45 years old, and for the last 25 of those years, that house has been my entire world. It was where I brought my babies home from the hospital. First Lisa, then 2 years later, Ryan. It was where I paced the floors at 3 a.m. with a teething infant in one arm and a textbook in the other, studying for a nursing degree I hoped would give them a better life. Their father left when Ryan was still in diapers. He said the responsibility was a cage and he needed to be free. He flew away, and I was left to hold the bars of that cage together, transforming it from a prison into a sanctuary for my children. I worked 2 jobs. By day, I was a nurse's aide at the local clinic, dealing with the aches and pains of strangers. By night, I cleaned office buildings downtown, the scent of antiseptic and industrial bleach clinging to my clothes like a second skin. I didn't take vacations. My car was a decade-old sedan with a permanent tremor. My clothes came from discount stores. My dinners were often whatever my kids left on their plates. Every extra dollar, every ounce of energy was poured into that house and into them. The mortgage payments were a monthly monster I had to slay. The leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom, the drafty windows in the living room, the ever-present threat of a boiler breakdown. I handled it all. I learned basic plumbing from library books and watched grainy online tutorials to recaulk the windows myself. The one thing I never neglected, the one true luxury I allowed myself, was the rose garden out front. It was my mother's legacy. Before she passed, she helped me plant the first bushes. Deep red Mr. Lincolns, pale pink Queen Elizabeths, and sunny yellow peace roses. She taught me how to prune them, how to feed them, how to protect them from black spot and aphids. After she was gone, tending to that garden felt like having a conversation with her. The scent of the blooms on a warm June evening was the only perfume I ever wore. It was the soul of the house. It was the soul of my motherhood. I thought I was raising good children. I thought they saw my struggle and appreciated it. When Lisa wanted to go to a private university for her business degree, a school far beyond our means, I didn't say no. I took on extra cleaning shifts and, in a moment of quiet desperation, I sold my grandmother's diamond earrings and a gold locket my own mother had given me. I told Lisa I'd found a grant. I never wanted her to feel the weight of that sacrifice, only the lift of the opportunity. When Ryan wanted to launch his own tech startup right out of college, full of jargon I didn't understand about disrupting markets and synergizing platforms, I co-signed the initial business loan. The bank manager looked at my modest finances and advised against it. "This is a significant risk, Mrs. Peterson," he'd said, his voice laced with professional concern. I just smiled and told him, I believe in my son. For a few years, it seemed my investment had paid off. They were successful. Lisa landed a marketing job with a fancy title and bought a trendy condo downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows. Ryan's startup got some initial press, and he bought a sprawling suburban house in a new development, the kind with a 3-car garage and a homeowners association that dictated the precise height of your lawn. They'd visit me for holidays, sweeping into my quiet, slightly worn-out home like visiting royalty. They'd bring expensive bottles of wine I didn't know how to pronounce and talk about their quarterly reports and their trips to Cabo. They'd look around my living room, at the comfortable but faded armchair I'd had for 20 years, at the scuff marks on the baseboards from their childhood toys, and a look would pass between them, a look of pity, or maybe it was impatience. The whispers started subtly. "Mom, this house is just so big for one person," Lisa would say, running a manicured finger over a dusty bookshelf. "The heating bills must be astronomical. You should be enjoying your life, not rattling around in this old place," Ryan would add, his eyes scanning the ceiling as if looking for cracks. "Think of the upkeep. It's a money pit." I'd just smile and change the subject. "Who wants more coffee? I baked that lemon drizzle cake you both love." I thought it was just careless talk, the thoughtless chatter of young adults who had forgotten where they came from. I never imagined it was the opening salvo in a war I didn't even know was being waged against me. The day it all became clear was a Tuesday. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that seeped into your bones. I had just finished an 11-hour shift at the clinic, and my feet were aching, a deep, throbbing pain that radiated up my legs. All I wanted was a hot cup of tea and the silence of my own home. I walked in through the back door, kicking off my worn sneakers, and there it was, lying on my clean kitchen table, a splash of glossy, vibrant color against the worn oak. A real estate brochure. I picked it up, my hands, still chapped from a day of washing them between patients, trembled slightly. The photo on the front was my house, but it wasn't my house. It had been photographed on a perfect, sunny day. The lawn was an almost artificial green, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. My rose bushes were in full, glorious bloom. The headline, in a slick, modern font, read, "Charming colonial with unlimited potential." I flipped it open. There was my living room, but my comfortable armchair had been pushed to the side, replaced in the photo's focus by a generic, staged vase of flowers. There was my kitchen, the little chip on the countertop I'd been meaning to fix cleverly hidden by a bowl of fake fruit. And there at the bottom in bold letters, "For sale. Contact Sterling Realty." A wave of nausea washed over me. It felt like walking into my own home and finding a stranger in my bed. It was a violation so profound, so intimate I couldn't breathe. "Lisa!" I called out. My voice was thin, reedy. She appeared from the living room, holding a tall glass of iced coffee, the plastic straw bobbing between her lips. She wasn't even looking at me, just scrolling through her phone. "Hey, Mom. Rough day." I held up the brochure. My hand was shaking so badly the paper rattled. "Lisa, what is this?" She glanced at it, then back at her phone, with an infuriatingly casual shrug. "Oh, that. Yeah." The realtor dropped off the proofs. "They look pretty good, right? He really captured the garden." My blood ran cold. The words came out in a strangled whisper. "The realtor? You talked to a realtor." "Mom, don't overreact," she sighed, finally putting her phone down and giving me a look of profound exasperation, the kind a parent gives a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Ryan and I talked to a guy. Gob. Seems really sharp. He says we can get this place on the market by the end of the month." At that moment, Ryan strolled into the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. He had that look on his face he always wore when he was about to explain something to me, as if I were a child. Let me be the logical adult here, look.
"Mom, you're being dramatic," he said, his voice smooth and placating. "The house is in your name, sure, but we're family. This is an asset. A huge, underutilized asset. Selling it helps all of us." The room started to spin. "Helps all of us? This is my home." The words felt inadequate, flimsy against their wall of calm, rational greed. Lisa took a sip of her coffee. "And you'll get a new home. A nice, small condo. No stairs to worry about, no yard work. We'll find you a place closer to us. It just makes sense. We can finally get the money out of this old place. The money. That's all it was to them. Decades of my life, my sweat, my tears, my sold heirlooms. It was just the money in this old place. They hadn't just gone behind my back. They had planned, strategized, and executed the sale of my entire life without even the courtesy of a conversation. They stood there, my two beautiful children, the ones I had built this world for, looking at me not with love or respect, but with the cool, appraising eyes of developers eyeing a plot of land. My throat tightened, grief and rage forming a solid lump I couldn't swallow. Without even asking me. Ryan pushed off the doorframe and took a step towards me. We are asking you, Mom. We're telling you our plan. A good plan. You'll thank us later when you're sitting pretty with a nice fat bank account and none of these headaches. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The betrayal was so absolute, it was silent. It sucked all the air from my lungs, all the words from my mouth. I just stared at their faces, faces I had once known better than my own, and saw only strangers. Strangers wearing the masks of my children. Slowly, deliberately, I folded the glossy brochure in half, then in half again, the sharp creases destroying the perfect, sunny picture of my home. I slipped the mangled paper into my purse. They took my silence for acquiescence. For defeat. They smiled at each other, a small, triumphant little smile that said, "See? That wasn't so hard." They thought the fight was over. They thought they had won. They had no idea that inside their gentle, accommodating mother, a part of me I thought had died long ago was stirring. A cold, quiet, calculating part of me that was born from years of scraping by, of fighting silent battles, of being underestimated. They had just declared war. And as I stood there in my own kitchen, a stranger in my own life, I made a silent vow. I would let them play their game. And then, I would burn their world to the ground. Part 2. The performance of a lifetime. The weeks that followed were the most surreal and agonizing of my life. I had to become an actress, and the role I was playing was Claire Peterson, a slightly confused but ultimately compliant mother. It was a performance that deserved an award, fueled by a rage so pure and so cold it felt like ice in my veins. On the outside, I smiled. I nodded. I agreed. But on the inside, a storm was gathering, a hurricane of meticulous fury. They brought the realtor, Bob, back to the house. He was exactly what you'd expect, slicked back hair, a suit that was a little too tight, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He walked through my home with a clipboard, talking about good bones and curb appeal, while barely looking at me. I was just part of the scenery, a ghost in the machine of their transaction. The kitchen will need a complete gut job, of course, he said to Lisa, tapping a pen against his teeth as he eyed my perfectly functional, albeit dated, oak cabinets. Buyers want granite. Stainless steel. An island. We know, Lisa said, nodding eagerly. We told her that years ago. She shot me a look, a little, "I told you so" smirk. I just smiled faintly and offered Bob a glass of water. Ryan was the numbers guy. He and Bob would sit at my kitchen table, my table, and talk about comps, market trends, and capital gains. They used a language designed to exclude me, to make me feel small and ignorant. The zestimate is a bit low, but with the right staging, we can create a bidding war, Ryan would say, puffing out his chest as if he were a seasoned real estate mogul. The staging. That was the first true violation. Lisa hired a company. A team of strangers descended on my house with truckloads of beige furniture, abstract art that looked like paint spills, and soulless gray cushions. They packed away my life into cardboard boxes. The faded armchair where I had rocked both my babies to sleep was deemed clutter, and relegated to the garage. The photos of them on the mantelpiece, Lisa with her missing front teeth, Ryan in his lopsided Little League uniform, were replaced with generic stock photos of smiling, anonymous families. I watched them dismantle my history, piece by piece, and my heart broke a little more with every item they stored away. But I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I just moved through the hollowed-out shell of my home, a pleasant, smiling phantom. My compliance seemed to relax them. They started getting careless. Their whispers grew louder, their conversations in my presence more brazen. One evening, I was in the garden, pruning the roses, my hands deep in the familiar soil. It was the only place that still felt like mine. Lisa and Ryan were on the back deck, sipping wine, believing I was out of earshot. "She's taking it better than I thought," Lisa said, her voice carrying on the still evening air. "I was expecting weeks of waterworks." "She knows what's best for her," Ryan replied, his tone insufferably smug. "Deep down, she knows she can't handle this place anymore. We're doing her a favor, really. Freeing her from this burden." A favor. A burden. The thorns on the rose stem in my hand dug into my palm, but I didn't even flinch. "And the timing couldn't be better," Lisa continued, her voice dropping a little. "My Amex bill is, well, you know. And that last-ditch funding you were hoping for, did it come through?" A pause. Then Ryan's heavy sigh. "No. It's over. The whole company is going under. I'm telling you, Lise, I'm leveraged up to my eyeballs. I need the equity from this house like I need air to breathe. If we don't sell, I'm in real trouble." "Me too," she whispered. "Don't tell Mom. It would just confuse her." Confuse me. That's what they thought of me. That I was a simple creature, incapable of understanding their complex, important adult problems. They weren't selling my house for my benefit. They were selling my life to bail out their own catastrophic failures. That was the moment the last vestiges of maternal softness in my heart hardened into something sharp and dangerous. The pain was still there, a dull, constant ache, but now it had a purpose. It was fuel. I went inside, washed the dirt from my hands, and opened my laptop. The phrase "public records search" glowed on the screen. It was surprisingly easy. Frighteningly so. County websites, courthouse databases. All open to anyone who knew where to look. I started with Ryan. His name and the address of his big suburban house. And there it was, a cascade of digital documents that told a story of utter desperation. Lien after lien from unpaid suppliers. A second mortgage taken out 6 months ago at a predatory interest rate. And the final beautiful nail in his coffin, a notice of default, filed by the bank 2 weeks prior. He was in pre-foreclosure. The clock was ticking. My heart hammered in my chest, a triumphant, terrifying rhythm. I moved on to Lisa. Her trendy condo was a similar story, though told in a different font. She had a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, that was maxed out to the penny. 3 credit card companies had filed judgments against her for tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid debt. While she wasn't in foreclosure yet, the financial rot was just as deep. She was one missed mortgage payment away from the same fate as her brother. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen illuminating the truth they had tried so hard to hide. They weren't powerful, successful adults doing me a favor. They were drowning children, thrashing about and trying to pull me under with them to use my body as a life raft. The open houses began the following weekend. That was the deepest humiliation. I had to make myself scarce, to literally leave my own home for hours on end while strangers paraded through, opening my closets, judging my life's possessions. I would sit in a nearby park, a book in my lap that I couldn't read, and watch the clock, feeling like an exile. During one of these open houses, I came back a few minutes early. I saw a couple leaving, talking to Bob the realtor on my front lawn. The woman, dripping in jewelry, gestured dismissively toward my rose garden. "That'll all have to be ripped out," she said loudly. "Too much maintenance. I'd want a clean, modern look. Maybe some gravel and a few minimalist sculptures." My breath caught in my throat. I saw Lisa, standing nearby, nod in agreement. "Oh, absolutely," Lisa chirped, her voice sickeningly sweet. "We'd planned on doing that anyway. It's so dated." Dated. My mother's legacy. The living, breathing soul of my home. Dated. I retreated back to my car before they could see me, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The actress was gone. The smiling, compliant mother was gone. In her place was a woman with a plan. A plan that was beginning to crystallize, moving from a vague notion of revenge into a step-by-step blueprint for their destruction. I started making my own quiet preparations. I went to my bank and met with a financial advisor, a kind woman named Sarah who had helped me set up a retirement account years ago. I explained that I was considering downsizing and wanted to understand my financial position. I didn't tell her the whole story, just enough. We went over my assets. The house, of course, was almost entirely paid off. But there was more. The life insurance policy from their father that I had never touched, letting it grow in a low-risk investment fund for 20 years. A handful of savings bonds my own parents had bought for me when I was born. My own modest 401k I had painstakingly contributed to from my cleaning job. When Sarah laid out the final numbers, even I was surprised. I wasn't wealthy, not by a long shot. But I was stable. I was secure. And I had more than enough liquid capital to do what needed to be done. A few days later, Ryan called me. He sounded frantic, his voice tight with a stress he was trying to hide. "Mom, we got an offer. It's a little under asking, but it's all cash, a quick close. Bob thinks we should take it." I felt a cold thrill. "Oh?" I asked, my voice deliberately hesitant. That's fast." "The market is hot, Mom. We have to move on it," he urged. "I'll send over the paperwork. You just need to sign." I looked at the foreclosure notice for his house I had printed out and pinned to the inside of a kitchen cabinet, hidden from view. The auction date was in 10 days. "Let me think about it, honey," I said, my voice soft and maternal. "It's a big decision." He swore under his breath, thinking I couldn't hear him. The desperation was rolling off him in waves. This was the final piece I needed. Their certainty that I was a pawn they could move around the board at will. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the staged, sterile rooms of my home. It didn't feel like mine anymore, and for the first time, I was okay with that. They had already taken it from me. They had ripped out its heart. But they thought they were selling it to a stranger. They had no idea I was about to buy something far more valuable. I pulled up the county auction website. Ryan's house was listed. A picture of the handsome suburban home he was so proud of, now just another distressed asset. There was a link for pre-registration. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I wasn't just going to watch the dominoes fall. I was going to be the one to push them. I was going to own their futures. And the first payment was due in 10 days.
Part 3. The Architect of Ruin. The 10 days leading up to the auction were a masterclass in deception. I played the part of the dithering, emotional mother to perfection. Every time Ryan or Lisa called to pressure me about the offer on my house, I had a new, plausible excuse. "I just can't find my good pen to sign the documents," I'd say, my voice trembling slightly. I had a chat with Martha from next door, and she said it's a terrible time to sell. The market is about to turn, I'd fret. "I'm just not sure I'm emotionally ready," I'd whisper, letting a tear creep into my voice. Their frustration was palpable. It came through the phone in sharp, exasperated sighs and condescending lectures. "Mom, Martha doesn't know anything about real estate." Ryan barked during one call. "This isn't about emotions, it's a financial transaction. You need to be logical." "We could lose this buyer, Mom," Lisa whined. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to get an all-cash offer?" Oh, I knew. I knew better than they could possibly imagine. While they were busy trying to manage my feelings, I was moving with the cold, silent efficiency of a predator. My first stop was to a lawyer. Not a friendly, local family lawyer, but a shark. I found her online, a woman named Brenda, who specialized in real estate and corporate law, with a photo on her website that looked like she ate nails for breakfast. Her office was in a sleek, downtown high-rise, a world away from my cozy, cluttered life. I sat across a vast mahogany desk from her and laid out the situation. I didn't embellish. I just stated the facts. My children's attempt to sell my home, their hidden debts, the impending foreclosures. I expected judgment, or perhaps pity. Instead, Brenda leaned back in her leather chair, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across her face. "So, let me get this straight," she said, her voice a low purr. "They tried to liquidate your primary asset to cover their own financial incompetence, and now you want to use your hidden assets to buy theirs out from under them at a foreclosure auction." Yes, I said simply. She let out a short, sharp laugh. Mrs. Peterson, I've been practicing law for 30 years. This might be the most beautifully symmetrical act of karmic justice I have ever had the pleasure of facilitating. Brenda was brilliant. She immediately pointed out the flaw in my initial, amateur plan. You can't buy it in your own name, she stated. They'd see it in the public records a day later. We need to create a shield. And so, Rose Garden Properties LLC was born. The irony was so delicious it made me want to weep. I was the sole anonymous member. Brenda handled all the paperwork, setting up a business bank account and acting as my registered agent. To the outside world, Rose Garden Properties was just another faceless investment company. But I knew the truth. It was the legacy of my mother's garden weaponized. We transferred a significant portion of my savings and the liquidated bonds into the LLC's account. Seeing that balance, that raw financial power under a name of my own creation, was intoxicating. It was the first time in my life I felt truly powerful, not as a mother, not as a caregiver, but as an individual with agency and means. The day of Ryan's foreclosure auction arrived. It was a gray, overcast morning. The auction wasn't held on the courthouse steps like in old movies. It was in a sterile, windowless conference room in a county administration building. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and quiet desperation. It was filled with professional vultures, hard-faced men in cheap suits and seasoned investors who looked bored by the whole process. I wore a simple, dark gray coat, a scarf, and a pair of non-prescription glasses. I looked like a librarian or a quiet clerk. I was invisible. I registered under the LLC's name, Brenda having coached me on exactly how to do it. I took a seat in the back, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands are freezing, and I clutched a paper cup of lukewarm coffee just to feel some warmth. When they called the address of Ryan's house, a knot of ice formed in my stomach. This was it, the point of no return. The auctioneer began his rhythmic, hypnotic chant. The opening bid was the outstanding balance on the loan, a number that would have once seemed astronomical to me. Another bidder, a fleshy man in a wrinkled polo shirt, immediately raised. Then another. They batted the price back and forth in $5,000 increments. I just sat and watched, following Brenda's instructions to the letter. Don't bid early. Let the amateurs wear themselves out. Know your absolute maximum price and don't get emotional. My maximum price was generous. It was the fair market value of the house, not the lowball foreclosure price. I wasn't trying to get a deal. I was trying to acquire a weapon. The bidding slowed. The man in the polo shirt dropped out with a grunt of frustration. It was down to one other professional investor and me. The auctioneer's eyes flicked to me. Do I have $375? He droned. I gave a single, sharp nod. My first bid. The investor, a wiry man with a notepad, immediately countered. $380. We went back and forth. My heart was in my throat. This was more money than I had ever conceived of spending in my life. Every nod I gave felt like jumping off a cliff. But then I pictured Ryan's smug face, heard his condescending voice telling me to be logical. I pictured Lisa's smirk as she agreed to rip out my mother's roses. The price climbed past $400,000. The investor was scribbling furiously on his notepad, his confidence wavering. He was here for a profit margin. I was here for retribution. We had very different motivations. The auctioneer called out $420. The investor looked at his notes, then at me. He shook his head almost imperceptibly. He was out. $420,000, the auctioneer chanted, going once, going twice. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear my own pulse roaring in my ears.
Sold. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. To the representative from Rose Garden Properties, LLC. A collective sigh went through the room as people shuffled papers and prepared for the next property. For them, it was just another transaction. For me, it was the first turn of the key in a lock of my own design. I walked to the front on unsteady legs, signed the initial paperwork, and arranged for the wire transfer from the LLC's account, my hands shaking so much I could barely hold the pen. Walking out of that building and into the daylight, I felt changed. The timid, heartbroken woman who had walked in 2 hours earlier was gone. In her place stood the owner of her son's house. The charade had to continue. That evening, Ryan called, his voice more strained than ever. "Mom, have you signed that offer yet? The buyer is getting antsy." I held the phone to my ear, a small, secret smile on my face. "I'm still thinking, honey," I said. "You know, I was looking at some of those condo brochures you and Lisa left for me. The ones with the nice little patios." I could hear him grinding his teeth. "Great, Mom. That's great. But we need to sell this one first before you can buy another one. That's how it works." "Oh, I know, dear," I said sweetly. "Don't you worry." Life settled into a new, tense rhythm. I continued to dither on the sale of my house while Brenda's office finalized the purchase of Ryan's. And I watched Lisa. I checked the public records every single day. For a few months, nothing changed. She was holding on, just barely. She and Ryan grew more and more agitated, calling me daily, their voices laced with an anger they could no longer conceal. They were trapped. They couldn't force me to sign, and without the infusion of cash from my house, their own financial houses of cards were teetering on the brink of collapse. Then, one crisp autumn morning, it appeared. The notice of default for Lisa's downtown condo. She'd finally missed enough payments. The bank had made its move. The second domino was wobbling. This time, I felt no fear, only a cold sense of inevitability. Lisa's foreclosure was a different process. Because it was a condo, the auction was scheduled to be held online. For weeks, I monitored the site. I did my research. I knew the unit's value, the outstanding debt. Lisa, in her desperation, tried a new tactic: emotional blackmail. She showed up at my house one night, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she sobbed, collapsing onto my staged soulless sofa. "Things are so tight. My boss is a monster. I think I might lose my job. I need a little help. If you could just sell the house, everything would be okay." I sat beside her and patted her back, the very picture of maternal sympathy. "Oh, my poor girl," I murmured. "Everything will work out. You'll see." I made her a cup of chamomile tea and listened to her litany of fabricated woes, all while knowing the truth. The real monster wasn't her boss, it was the mountain of debt she had accrued living a life she couldn't afford. The day of her condo's online auction, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd first seen their treacherous brochure. The bidding was a simple digital interface. I typed in the name Rose Garden Properties, LLC, and entered my first bid. It was less dramatic than the live auction, but no less intense. It was just me, the screen, and the ticking clock. In the end, there was very little competition. The condo market was saturated, and the high HOA fees were a deterrent. With 3 seconds left on the clock, I placed my final bid. The screen refreshed. A message in green letters appeared: "Congratulations. You are the winning bidder." I leaned back in my chair and took a deep, shuddering breath. I had done it. I now held the deeds to both of their homes. The trap was fully constructed, baited, and set. All the pieces were in place. The long, agonizing performance was over. Now, all I had to do was wait for my homeless, bankrupt children to come knocking on my door. The final act was about to begin, and I had written the script myself. Part 4, The Reckoning. The waiting was the easiest part. After months of high-wire tension and emotional gymnastics, the quiet that followed my second purchase felt like the calm in the eye of a hurricane. The sale of Ryan's house was finalized, the deed registered to Rose Garden Properties, LLC. The eviction notice, a standard, impersonal legal document, was served by the county sheriff. I imagined Ryan's shock, his arrogant disbelief turning to panic as he was informed that his home had been sold at auction and he had 30 days to vacate. Lisa's process was similar. A few weeks later, her condo deed was transferred. Another eviction notice was served. I felt nothing. No pity, no remorse. The part of me that would have wept for their misfortune had been carved out and cauterized by their betrayal. I called the realtor, Bob, and told him I had changed my mind. I was taking my house off the market. The sputtering, indignant rage on the other end of the line was immensely satisfying. I'm sure he got an earful from my children later that day. Then, I began the work of reclaiming my own home. The staging company came and took back all their sterile, gray furniture. I went to the garage and unpacked my life. I put the faded armchair back in its rightful place by the window. I put the photos of my gap-toothed children back on the mantelpiece. I scrubbed the floors until the scent of their realtor's chemical air freshener was gone, replaced by the familiar smell of lemon polish and old wood. I worked in the garden, trimming back the summer growth, preparing the roses for the coming frost. My house felt like mine again. It felt like a fortress. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when they finally came. Just as I knew they would. I saw them through the living room window, pulling up to the curb in Lisa's car, the last of her major assets, which I knew would be repossessed any day now. They walked up the path, their shoulders hunched against the drizzle, looking not like the powerful, successful adults they pretended to be, but like what they were, defeated, lost children. They looked exhausted. Broken. The doorbell rang. I didn't rush to answer it. I took a moment. I smoothed my apron, took a deep breath, and let the cold, hard resolve settle deep in my bones. This was not a mother opening the door to her children. This was a property owner addressing a business matter. I opened the door only halfway, leaving the chain on. They stood huddled together on the porch, rain dripping from their hair. Lisa's expensive makeup was smudged, and Ryan's designer jacket was soaked through. "Mom," Lisa began, her voice trembling, a stark contrast to the confident, dismissive woman who had sipped iced coffee in my kitchen months ago. "Mom, we need your help. We've lost everything." Ryan, for his part, couldn't even meet my eyes. He just stared at the welcome mat, his jaw clenched. The humiliation was radiating off him. "We need a place to stay," Lisa continued, her voice cracking. "Just for a little while. Just until we can get back on our feet." I looked at them. At their pleading eyes, their fine clothes that now looked like costumes. I felt the full weight of their betrayal, of their condescension, of their utter lack of love or respect for me. And I felt the beautiful, solid weight of the 2 new deeds filed away safely in my desk drawer. I said nothing for a long moment. I just held their gaze, letting the silence stretch, letting them marinate in their desperation. "You tried to sell my house," I said finally. My voice was calm, level, and devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. "You stood in my kitchen and told me it was for the best, that you were doing me a favor. You brought strangers into my home to pick over my life. You planned to make me homeless for your own financial gain." Lisa started to cry. Real tears this time. "Mom, we're so sorry. We were desperate. We made a terrible mistake." "No," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs like glass. "A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. What you did was a calculated, deliberate act of profound cruelty. You didn't think I was a person. You thought I was a resource to be exploited." Ryan finally looked up, his face a mask of fury and shame. "So what? You're just going to throw us out on the street? Your own kids?" A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first genuine smile they had seen from me in months. It probably looked terrifying. "Oh no," I said. "I wouldn't do that." I paused, savoring the flicker of hope in their eyes before I extinguished it completely. "I'm not as cruel as you are. I have a solution. You need a place to stay, and as it happens, I have 2 vacant properties available for rent." I unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. In my hand, I held 2 documents. I held one out to Ryan. "This is a 1-year lease agreement for 24 Somerset Drive. I'm sure you recognize the address. The rent is $2,000 a month, plus utilities. First and last month's rent are due upon signing." His jaw dropped. He stared at the paper, then at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. You bought my house?" "I did," I said calmly. Then I turned to Lisa and held out the second document. And this is a lease for Unit 7B at the downtown lofts. $1,500 a month. Same terms apply. I require a full credit check and 3 references from each of you." The silence on the porch was broken only by the sound of the rain. They stared at me, their faces a comical mixture of horror, confusion, and dawning comprehension. "You can't be serious," Ryan whispered, his voice hoarse. "Oh, I have never been more serious in my entire life," I replied, my smile unwavering. "The properties are owned by a company called Rose Garden Properties. I am the sole proprietor. You will make your rent checks out to the company. They will be due on the 1st of every month. A late fee of $100 will be applied after the 3rd. If you default, I will have you evicted. Legally, of course. I do everything by the book." Lisa just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, why would you do this to us?" My smile vanished. The coldness returned to my voice. "I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourselves. You built this prison. I just happen to own it now. You want a roof over your heads? Sign the leases. Become my tenants. Or don't. The choice is yours. But you are not staying here." I placed the leases on the small table by the door. "Let me know what you decide. You have 24 hours to return the signed documents with a certified check." And then I did the most satisfying thing I have ever done in my life. I closed the door in their faces, shutting out their shocked expressions and the cold, miserable rain. I slid the deadbolt home. The sound echoed through the quiet house, a beautiful, final sound of victory. They signed the leases. Of course they did. They had no other choice. So now, they live in the homes they once owned, writing a rent check every month to the mother they thought was too weak and stupid to fight back. Ryan mows the lawn of his old house because landscaping maintenance is stipulated in his lease agreement. Lisa has to call and submit a formal maintenance request to me if her sink gets clogged. Every month, I receive 2 checks. I drive them to the bank and deposit them into the account for Rose Garden Properties, LLC. And every time the teller stamps the deposit slip, I don't feel anger or hatred. I feel peace. A profound, unshakable peace. The kind of peace that comes from justice. I am not their mother anymore. Not in the way I was. The part of me that would have sacrificed everything for their happiness is gone, and they are the ones who killed it. Now, I am their landlord. I am the stable, solid foundation under their feet, but it is a foundation they must pay for, month after month. They thought my home was just an asset. So I became an asset manager. They taught me that love can be transactional. So I wrote them into a transaction they can never escape. My rose garden is beautiful this year. I spend my mornings tending to it, my hands in the rich soil. The thorns don't bother me. I've learned that sometimes, the most beautiful things have the sharpest thorns, not just for protection, but to remind everyone around them that they are not to be trifled with. They say forgiveness is divine. But I'm here to tell you, sometimes well-executed, financially binding, legally enforced justice is a hell of a lot more satisfying. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have forgiven them? Or would you have become their landlord? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Every family has its secrets, and every person has their breaking point. If you believe in the power of taking back your story and serving justice, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell for more stories of righteous, and sometimes ruthless, revenge. Thank you for listening.